Well, as you were hearing there's a difficult couple of days ahead, at least for families whose loved ones may have been burnt beyond recognition in that building fire in Marshalltown. Over 70 people who were killed. We're hearing now a lot of them, their remains now burnt beyond recognition. What will the process then entail? We're joined tonight by a former forensic geneticist from the South African Police Service, Luthando Tiya. Very good evening to you, Luthando. Grateful for your time. So, what exactly does it mean when we say someone's body or remains are burnt beyond recognition?
Good evening, Tembekile, and good evening to your viewers. I think first and foremost, I would like to send my condolences to all the families that are impacted by this massive tragedy. Yeah, so basically, when someone is burnt beyond recognition, it means you cannot make any facial ID, facial identification. So you cannot have a loved one come into the mortuary and choose or say whether these burnt victims are their kids or from their families.
Mm. So now the government has said what's going to be relied on is, a process of DNA testing in order to make the link between each body and people who come forward as possible loved ones, family. What is that going to entail?
First and foremost, I also just want to say that I am confident that our national, whether private or public laboratories are equal to this task of doing this identification. So this would entail basically making a DNA match from any source that is viable. This could be blood or could be any other tissue. But then particularly in burnt cases, you find issue with getting DNA from these sources, the what we call the DNA-rich sources. So you'd have to rely on extracting DNA from bone.
Mm-hmm. And how much of a complication then does that become for the teams?
Well, it is a huge complication. First, the fact that these deceased are burnt beyond recognition means that there was a huge amount of heat that these bodies have been exposed to. And we know that naturally DNA doesn't like any heat because it denatures or it gets destroyed. So there is no guarantee that even in bone will be able to get any DNA. But then you'd hope, because it's a strong enough matrix, that will be able to obtain DNA from there.
Mm. And does it matter, Luthando, what amount of time passes from when the person was killed to when someone comes forward to try and claim the remains, in cases where it's not even a body that's left, in terms of trying to make the link so that a family can lay them to rest?
Well, the extraction process, I'm sure it will continue if it hasn't continued already, or if it hasn't started already. So that DNA profile can be kept on the system. So for years, in fact. So it's like anyone can come forward from as soon as that DNA profile is available till whenever someone comes forward. So there's no time limit once the DNA has already been extracted.
Mm. And can the DNA of any loved one be used in terms of trying to make the link, or are there people, shall we say, in your family who it's best if their DNA is used, shall we say, in terms of trying to make the connection?
I think it's preferred that the DNA of our biological parents be the one used, because they are the closest link genetic-wise to the deceased. However, it is also possible if the deceased no longer has any living parents, that other relatives can be used. But then the genetic connection becomes even wider.
Mm. What does that mean, that it becomes even wider, and what are the implications for the process?
Yeah, that basically means it is not as conclusive as it would be when you have the biological parents.
What does that complication or the lack of or let's say, let me rewind, it's being less conclusive, would that impact on the ability then of the pathology services releasing remains or to a family and allowing them to bury that? And where does that leave us in terms of disputes between families who may, in fact, want to claim the same person? We've already heard now of one body that's been claimed by two families.
Yeah. So usually when we have an unconclusive result, we would basically ask the family to bring other relatives that would be perhaps more genetically closer to the deceased. So it prolongs the process, because the people that come forward might not necessarily be the ones where a link can be established.
All right, Luthando Tiya, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time on News at Prime tonight.